All right, everybody, it's the Combatcast with the man called Dave and Chevy, and we are going to preview this weekend's Fight Night, Hernandez versus Strickland, and we're going to talk about that fight card. But before we get to this week's Fight Night, let's talk about the schedule.
All right, February 28th, UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Kavanaugh. That's 8 p.m. from Mexico. And then March 7th, UFC 326, Holloway versus Oliveira 2, 9 p.m. from T-Mobile in Vegas. And then March 14th, UFC Fight Night, Emmett versus Valios. That is 8 p.m. from the Apex. Josh Emmett back in action.
And I had mentioned we're going to get to the Fight Night, but before we do that, I'm going to talk a little Zuffa boxing again. I've been doing this on Patreon a little more and just kind of look at some of the fighters for Zuffa boxing. Chevy, you like this? I did a little homework. This is the main event was a gentleman, Efe Ajagba, all right?
Ajagba is a good boxer name.
Yes, it is. Very good. He is now 20-1 with 15 knockouts. He defeated Charles Martin by TKO around 4. These were heavyweights. Charles Martin has the second shortest reign of a heavyweight champion ever. He was the IBF heavyweight champion in 2016. He held it for 64 days. Oh, I'm sorry. He had his record for 85 days. 64 days was the other guy. He lost it to Anthony Joshua.
Yeah.
But anyway, did not work out well for him. He got KO'd in round 3. They had light heavyweights. Umar Dambekov, 16-0 with 12 KOs, defeated Ahmed Ibayi. So he's still undefeated, 17-0. He had a great knockout. And then another knockout it was lightweights. Javier Penbenito, who's now 11-0 with 8 KOs. So Zuffa boxing had a bunch of knockouts. The crowd was a little more lively at the Apex. I guess that's going to happen when you're getting knockouts.
So how's the production? So is it Kellerman and Anik?
Kellerman, and he's done boxing commentary before. He actually does commentary for wrestling now. Monday Night Raw, and he's done college football. Joe Tessitore.
Joe Tessitore, yeah.
Yeah, so Joe Tessitore, Kellerman, and Andre Ward are your...
That is a very accomplished commentary team.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, it's unfortunate like we talked about because they're always on Sundays for you. I'm hoping they'll mix it up because we did have one Friday event, but they do
Thursday. But that's easier to swing than Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so far, the matchmaking's getting better. Universally, this was kind of looked at as the best event they've had so far. And, Dana was just saying, because I thought production, it kind of looks like the first week a little bit from what I've seen. So it's decent, but I think there's room for improvement. But, Dana says judges, at the end of the year, he said, I'm looking at this. He said, I'll be working on production for the next 5 years. He says he's this is a work in progress as far as that goes. But yeah, I think there's something to this. Like, I think there is something where a lot of these fighters who weren't making money on their lower level are hungry. And, there's a good chance we're going to produce some good results here. But we're still early in this project. So
I don't think they have I was just looking. I don't think they have their next event scheduled yet.
So I might not be
on their website. They're not very good with the... it's under the UFC website, so we know how
talk about that. A friend of us had posted a thing, I think it was on X, where it talked about how UFC doesn't promote fights anymore. And I've heard that, but when they showed that, when somebody broke it down and they had that video of what they had with Conor McGregor for Aldo back in the day, and just some of the face-to-faces they would set up, with Rockhold and Bisping, and I don't know if they had it, but Cruz and Dillashaw. I was like, damn, they have dropped the ball of that over the last few years. We could do a lot better job of, where's the video packages for that stuff? You got to get out there. The next event is the weekend of UFC 326, Holloway, Oliveira.
Right, because they're doing the giveaway thing.
Yep, right. And that'll be the cruiserweight vacant crew. We'll have the first championship, and that'll be for the cruiserweight title. So, yeah, it's a nice little package deal, especially when they put it on with the pay-per-views, and hopefully it gets some steam. I enjoyed this. I talked about it off air. One thing I liked about it is watching the next day, very quick. I can just watch the fights, no commercials, right to it. We also talked about sometimes that sucks though, if it's a day after a pay-per-view and we want to see maybe an interview or something, or like you said, sometimes it gives away. We know there's going to be a finish. I knew there was going to be a finish in all of these fights because I'm looking at it. I'm like, 10-round fight, 10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, the time on the video, it shows the time on the video, and you can see that it's short. So you know that there was something happened. Yeah. So,
right.
that was one thing that ESPN did properly is when in their backlog or in their, their catalog, they had each individual fight you could go watch from a card, or you could watch the card in its entirety. And obviously, you don't want spoilers. We're doing content. We want to see everything. So watching the entire card would be ideal. So hopefully Paramount will add that to the repertoire. I saw some other people talking about that after the last few weeks, and they seem to be improving their production as we go. So obviously still very new, so hopefully they'll add that into their catalog going forward.
Absolutely. Let's get to the main event, the big thing here. After a week off, we're back with Fight Nights, and this is an interesting main event. Hernandez and Strickland. I like the co-main event. We didn't talk about it. I'm going to ask you obviously for other fights in this card.
Yeah, on the prelims, couple interesting fighters: Jordan Levitt, Phil Rowe, Punahele Soriano, Ode Osborne, Chidi and Jokawani, all, exciting fighters, all fighting people I've never heard of, though. So, tune in for the prelims for those. And then obviously on the undercard, which you had just shown, Michel Pereira versus Zach Reese.
Yes.
Pereira's always exciting in his fights. Serghei Spivac versus Ante Delija, heavyweight fight, so could be really bad or good. And then Dan Ige versus Melquizael Costa. Tough fight for Dan Ige, but he's a tough guy. So
yeah, like to see Dan Ige get in the win column.
All right, let's get in this co-main event though. This is these two fights are very good. This co-main kind of flying under the radar. So Geoff Neal versus Uros Medic.
Yeah, Uros Medic, 12-3, 10 KOs, 2 subs, 6-3 in the UFC. This guy has won 3 out of his last 4, including 2 in a row. He's never been into a decision in his career, win or lose. In his pro career, no decisions. This guy is all finishes. Performance of the night twice. Geoff Neal, 16-7, take 10 KOs, 2 subs, 4 decisions. Geoff has lost 3 out of his last 4, but you look at that a little closer, it's Carlos Prates, it's Ian Gary, it's Shavkat Rakhmonov. It's basically the top 3 pretty much young lions in his division that are already top contenders. Geoff's got we talk about strength of schedule all the time, and Geoff is definitely way more on that strength of schedule. He's got wins over Ponzinibbio, Vicente Luque, RDA. I had this in my notes. I forgot to put it down. It doesn't matter. I can tell you because I've watched enough Geoff Neal fights. This will be interesting. I'm going to go Geoff Neal, not just for strength of schedule, but just when I examine these two of the fighters, they're both explosive and they like to bring it. And I feel like that's going to favor Geoff Neal, who I think hits a little bit harder. And I'm going to go with Neal, TKO round 2, because these guys don't seem to like to go to decision.
Yeah, I like where you're at here. Medic caught by Punahele Soriano, who we just mentioned is going to be on the prelims January of last year, but he's been dominating guys in the first round too. Not just all finishes, but a lot of these finishes are in the first round as well. So he got a big win in November over kickboxer Muslim Salikov. That was his most impressive win by far. I'm a fan, but Geoff Neal, very tough stylistic matchup. I think Geoff's going to have a large speed advantage. He has great footwork, great head movement. So I think he makes Medic miss and then punishes him for it. So I'm with you. I'm going to go Geoff Neal by TKO in round 2. Excited for that fight, though.
Yeah, stylistic. I saw that fight. I said that might be fight of the night, actually.
It could be, but this one also very strong contender. Sean Strickland versus Anthony Hernandez.
Strickland, 29-7, 11 KOs, 4 subs, 14 decisions. He's won 4 out of his last 6. His only losses are to DDP, and those were both middleweight title fights when DDP was middleweight champion. Strickland has had fight of the night 1 time, performance of the night 3 times. Hernandez, 15-2-1, 3 KOs, 9 subs, 3 decisions. Performance of the night 4 times. Also, I like this stat. Most takedowns landed in UFC middleweight division history. That is interesting because, boy, Strickland has a great takedown defense. So that is going to be interesting here. Hernandez is on an 8-fight win streak. 6 of those fights are finishes. All right. And people going to decision with him are guys like Brendan Allen. So super tough fights. Ultimately, I like Hernandez by decision. I think he's going to do what Strickland does. I think he's going to put the pace on Strickland. I think it's going to be a hell of a pace for 5 rounds, but I think Hernandez is better. Well, I don't know if he's necessarily better on his hand. We're going to find that out, but I do think he's better. Like if it does go to the ground, that's a big if though. Like we said, we talk about Strickland's ability to keep fights, standing. But one thing that's interesting to me that we haven't talked about is Strickland hasn't fought since February 9th of last year. This is a guy who loves to be active. He's had a lot of time away after especially losing those 2 title fights. It'll be interesting to see which Strickland we see. Will this be a guy who's recovered in a great headspace, ready to go? Or, is this maybe somebody on the tail end? Might not matter because Hernandez is just that good and has all this momentum. I like the fact that Hernandez is the busier the fighter, especially when we're talking about keeping up a great pace. I'll go Hernandez by decision because unlike the previous co-main event, these 2 guys are hard to finish.
Yeah, very interesting fight. I really think it just comes down to who can grind the other guy out with their cardio and pressure. So Sean uses striking, like you said, and great takedown defense with those teep kicks and stuff. Fluffy Hernandez uses grappling. He's the middleweight Marab, I'm with you though. I'm going to go with Fluffy. I can see it going the distance, but it's tough. Sean's never been submitted before, but I really want to pick Fluffy by submission.
That's me.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to pick Fluffy by submission. I'll say round 4, late in the fight, they grind each other down. I'm interested to see what Sean looks like if he has to fight going backwards. Because he's never the one going backwards. So Fluffy, I think, can fight going backwards because those takedowns are easier if someone's coming forward at you. I think Sean will have a harder time with his game plan if he's the one going backwards. So I'm going to say submission round 4 for Fluffy. And I think he puts Sean out because I don't see Strickland tapping either. So I think he chokes him unconscious.
I was really looking back. I don't remember Strickland really getting finished other than Alex Pereira, where he decided to do the pace.
I think when he was at welterweight, for a while. I think he got finished there a couple times, cutting too much weight probably. Yeah, I mean, he's just a tough guy to get out of there. And, I was looking around. The smart money seems to be, I don't know about the smart money, but most people seem to be picking Hernandez, But I guess the one interesting thing is, though, too, if Sean can keep it on the feet the whole time and really push his game plan. You never know. But I'm with you. I'm going to go Hernandez. It's funny you said that. I was thinking about going Hernandez by submission. I was going to go round 4 too, but ultimately Sean just hasn't been submitted. So I went the opposite, and I'm going Hernandez by decision. That's going to probably be it for the regular portion this week, right? We had a week off. It's a fight night. It's pretty straightforward. And why don't we just tell people what we got coming up one more time? All right. February 28th, UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Kavanaugh. That's 8 p.m. from Mexico. And then March 7th, UFC 326, Holloway versus Oliveira 2, 9 p.m. from T-Mobile in Vegas. And then March 14th, UFC Fight Night, Emmett versus Valios, 8 p.m. from the